Welcome to another video from explainingcomputers.com. This time we're going to take a look at Zorin OS 18, which has just been released. Zorin OS is a Linux distro that's always been targeted at people migrating from Windows to Linux, and indeed it's no coincidence at all that version 18 of Zorin OS became available on the same day as the end of support for Windows 10. So let's go and take a closer look. Right, it's now 5:20 on October the 14th, 2025. Windows 10 has reached end of support and Zorin OS 18 has just been released. This latest edition is based on Ubuntu 24.04 LTS and so has support until June 2029, after which an upgrade should be straightforward. And in this respect, note that an upgrade tool will soon allow an upgrade from Zorin OS 17 to 18. However, here we're going to do a clean install, so let's go on over to the download page. Here we are, where we discover there are 3 versions of Zorin OS 18. And the first of these is Zorin OS 18 Pro. This has a few more features and a lot more pre-installed software, and it is a paid version of the operating system. But before people start jumping up and down in the comments, do not fear, there are also 2 free versions of Zorin OS 18, Core and Education. As I'm sure you can guess, the latter over here contains some educational apps not included in other editions, whilst Core is the main free version on what we're initially going to download and install. So let's click the button. Here we go, very exciting, and we can subscribe to a newsletter if we wish, or we can just skip to download, which is what I will do here. And there's the file. Let's click on Save, and it'll save our file. So let's just speed on through as our download progresses. And there we go. Next, we need to image this ISO file to a bootable USB drive, and Zorin provide an excellent set of instructions for doing this using a free program called Balena Etcher. And here in Windows 10, I do have Balena Etcher installed. However, right now, it's not working properly. And I know from hundreds of comments on my YouTube videos that a lot of people are currently having problems running Etcher in Windows. And so here we're going to write the Zorin OS ISO file to a bootable USB drive using another free program called Rufus. And you can get Rufus from its website, which is over here, and you can find the Windows download just a bit down the page. There it is down there. Here are the Windows versions of Rufus. So let's run up Rufus on this system. There we go, Windows checks we want to do it. We most certainly do. There we are, and it's already picked up the USB drive I've plugged into this computer, which needs to be at least 4 GB in size for Zorin OS Core. And do note that everything on this drive will be deleted. So let's select our Zorin OS ISO file. There it is, all waiting for us to install it. And with it selected, we'll click on Start, where we immediately get this message about ISO hybrid image detected. We can stick on ISO mode and OK. And then Rufus does remind us that everything on our USB drive will be deleted, or as it says, destroyed, which is OK, so we will click on OK. And there we are. As we apply the magic of filmmaking to speed on through, Rufus will now create our Zorin OS installation media. Right, we're now booting from our USB drive, and if you need help making your computer do this, I've left some notes in the video description. And fairly soon we arrive at this menu, which will rapidly default to try or install Zorin OS. But it's worth noting that if we go down, there's an option to do this using modern NVIDIA drivers. So, if your computer has an NVIDIA GPU, choose this menu item to have NVIDIA drivers all set up for you. Although here we're installing on a computer with Intel graphics, so we'll go back up to try and install Zorin OS and press Enter. And if we now call on the magic of filmmaking to speed on through, we soon arrive on the Zorin OS 18 desktop with its spectacular new default wallpaper. And if you want to try out Zorin OS running from the USB drive, you can do so using the option here. This will not install anything on your computer. And indeed, I would strongly recommend doing this before opting for an install to check that things like Wi-Fi and the trackpad on a laptop do work. However, here I know that everything is going to work, and so with the correct language selected, I'm going to click on Install Zorin OS. And we then just need to select our keyboard layout, for me English UK, and I will continue. And then here I'm going to leave checked download updates while installing Zorin OS and install third-party software for graphics and Wi-Fi hardware and additional media formats. And so once again we'll click on continue. Next, on this test computer, there's nothing on the internal SSD, and so the default option is to erase disk and install Zorin OS. However, if you run the installer on a PC with, for example, Windows 10 already installed on it, then things will look something like this, with the default option being to set up a dual boot. And whilst this will almost certainly work, I would personally advise against a single drive dual boot system, as I've detailed in other videos. And so here I would also select to erase disk and install Zorin OS, which would of course remove Windows as well as all software and user data from the system. Anyway, back with our live install, we'll similarly stay with the option erase disk and install Zorin OS and click on Install Now, which generates this safety check, making sure we really do want to do this. We do. I'll click on Continue. And then, guess what? We need to confirm our time zone, which for me is London. So once again, I'll click on Continue. Next, we need to set up a local user account. So I'll enter my details for that. There we go. And so once again, we're going to accelerate time, although I always think it's exciting to witness an old computer being given new life with a new operating system. And there we are, installation is complete. So let's click on Restart Now, after which we need to remove our USB drive and press Enter. And what will now happen is we will boot back into our new installation of Zorin OS. So let's now log in. There we go, and we'll get a first run wizard. There it is. It's beckoning us to start a tour, to which I'm going to say no thanks, because I'm now going to make a few scaling changes so things read better on video, and after that we'll have a proper look around. Greetings! Here I am back again on the beautiful Zorin OS 18 desktop. Although compared to Zorin OS 17, it's had a subtle refresh, not least with the default theme adopting rounded corners. Just as in Windows 10, at the bottom of the screen we have a taskbar. This is called the panel in most Linux distros, but if I right click you see we have taskbar settings, so we do call it the taskbar here in Zorin OS, and you can customize it to your heart's content. Also, like in Windows, on the end of a taskbar on the left we have a menu for accessing applications. So for example we've got LibreOffice pre-installed, and under sound and video we've got a camera application and a video player. Also from this menu we can go to settings, which have been slightly redesigned. This is where I've done some of my scaling, but we can also here go to appearance and change the desktop background. Lots of lovely desktop backgrounds are included in Zorin OS. And in addition to settings in Zorin OS, we go back to the menu, we can go to Zorin Appearance, which offers even more customization possibilities. These include changing the theme, the accent color, also going to a dark mode if we want like that, although I'm going to come back to light for now. And we've also got effects here. We can turn on, for example, the famous jelly mode, so Windows do this. I think I'll leave that turned off. And we can also turn on the desktop cube for switching between workspaces in 3D. I'll just show you that. We go down here, we can go between workspaces in 3D. I think again I will turn that off. I don't think I need that, but it's there if you want it. We can also decide what we want on the desktop. As you can see, the various icons are available, the various Windows options here. interface options here and a reasonable control of fonts. We can change some interface elements, giving us far more control than we've got, for example, in Windows 10 or Windows 11, although less control than in other Linux desktops, including KDE Plasma and the Cinnamon desktop in Linux Mint. However, what we can do here in Zorin OS in Appearance is to go to Layout and select different layouts. This is the default one, but if I, for example, go over here, you'll see things change a little bit. We can now see names against applications. We also have other layouts. This one is a more traditional Linux one. We would click here to show apps like that. And we've even got an even more traditional Linux one like this. I would now go up here to Personal Activities, and then we could access the menu, but I think I'll come back to the default. I like the default layout. And if you've noticed, it says get more desktop layouts. How do you do this? You do this by purchasing Zorin OS Pro. Another new feature to point out is the new tiling manager. So for example, if I open up the Files application, which has also had a slight refresh, if I take this and put it to the top of the screen, we get this little thing here where we can actually position it in Windows by this method. We could have it up that top corner like that if we wanted to, or we could bring it back and do it maybe over that side. So this is quite useful if you do a lot of tiling. I personally don't do a lot of tiling, and if you're thinking, can I turn that off? You can. You can go to Zorin Appearance and to Windows and turn off Advanced Window Tiling. Now, a key thing I didn't mention in the last part of the video is the default web browser here in Zorin OS 18, which is Brave. We can see it down here on the taskbar, and indeed this is the only web browser installed on this system. Brave replaced Firefox in Zorin OS from version 17.3 onwards, and Zorin do explain their decision on this page, which, like all web pages I show, I'll link in the video description. However, in the past, Brave has undertaken some dubious practices, as detailed, for example, on this page, which provides this list of some of the dubious things Brave has done in the past. Now, Zorin do note that they've reduced the visibility of various optional features in Brave, including Brave News, Leo AI, Brave Rewards, sponsored background images, and Brave Wallet. But the fact they've chosen to do this, I think, speaks volumes. Now, I know that some people do like Brave, and if you're one of them, fair play to you, and you may want to skip ahead to the next chapter of this video. But due to its past practices, Brave is not a piece of software I would personally ever trust. Zorin could have offered a choice of browser during install, like for example in Raspberry Pi OS, which allows the user to select Firefox or Chromium and to remove the other if they wish. But sadly, Zorin has so far not decided to do this. So the first thing I'll do in any Zorin OS 18 install is to go to the Software Center, here it is, and to search for another browser. Here I'll select Firefox, here it is, and install. There we go. And once installed, I'll now go and pin this to the panel, to the taskbar, by going to find it here in the menu. There it is, and we can right click and pin to dash, or in other words, pin to the taskbar. There we are, we've got Firefox down here. So we next just need to remove Brave. And at a rudimentary level, this can be achieved by going back to the Software Center and searching for Brave. There we go, picking it like that. And in theory, we could just click on uninstall. However, this does not get rid of everything, and has been reported to lead to errors in Zorin Software Updater, as reported on this page. And so, what I'm now going to do is something I didn't want to do in this video, and I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to go to Utilities, and scroll down and open up a terminal. You should not have to use a terminal for any setup or standard computing activities in Zorin OS, but we do need to use it to fully remove the Brave browser. And I'll include the instructions I'm about to enter in the terminal in the video description. So we'll start off by entering this, and it'll ask us for our system password, and at the confirmation we'll enter Y, and just to clean things up we'll now enter this command. Finally, to prevent those potential problems with the updater, we'll enter this. And there we go, Brave should now have been reasonably comprehensively removed from this system. and I say reasonably comprehensively as there may still be some user data in the user's home folder, and I'll leave some further instructions for removing this in the video description. However, if you've never typed anything critical into the Brave browser, it should not be an issue. And so, with all this complete, let's get back to the positive side of Zorin OS 18. Windows users who migrate to Zorin OS 18 need to accept that it's a Linux distro that therefore runs Linux applications. And as we've seen, it's very easy to open up the software store and to search for and install Linux software. However, because Windows users will be used to Windows software, Zorin OS tries far harder than most distros to assist users with their transition to Linux. For a start, it provides this page here that lists Windows programs that cannot be used, with alternatives indicated, as we can see. And whether or not you choose Zorin as your distro, if you're new to Linux, this is a very useful resource. Secondly, Zorin OS 18 comes pre-configured to install some Windows software using a compatibility layer called Wine. This does not work for many key applications, including those listed on this page. But it does mean if we go to a folder that contains some Windows executables, here we are, we can go to one of these files and right-click and open with, stick with the default app, which is install Windows application, and click on Open. And if this is the first time you've done this, you'll then need to click on Install Windows App Support, and then on Install. After which, we need to enter our system password, and let the process complete, which can take a little time, but when it has completed, your Windows program, if supported, will install in the normal fashion, as we can see here for Autodesk Mesh Mixer. There we go. And with this complete, we find there are some icons on the desktop, but there's also now a new menu item for Wine, which includes installed Windows software, which includes for us here Mesh Mixer. So here we are running a Windows application in Zorin OS 18. And if you want to know more, a video all about running Windows programs in Linux will release on this channel very soon. Greetings, here I am back again, now with a dark theme, and staying with the issue of transitioning from Windows, it is worth noting that in Zorin OS, as in any other Linux distro, it is possible to run the online versions of Word and Excel, etc. Here we are running the online version of Word, and here I am accessing my Outlook email. And in this context, it's worth being aware that if you do work with a Microsoft account, you can go to the settings down here and go to online accounts and log into Microsoft 365 plus OneDrive. I've already done this on this system, and once we've done that, if we open up the file manager, guess what? We can access OneDrive, which is a rather nice feature to have in Zorin OS 18. Previously, we saw there is this paid or pro version of Zorin OS 18, and so I thought we should take a look. Earlier, I therefore bought a copy, with the price being $47.99 or £47.99 for me here in the UK. And I should note that Zorin did offer me a free review copy, but I purchased my own to preserve my independence and to prevent this video becoming a paid promotion. And guess what? Here we are running Zorin OS 18 Pro. So, what extra do we get? Well, in addition to supporting the development of Zorin OS, purchasing the Pro Edition gets you technical support via email to assist with installation on one computer if required. Secondly, there are a lot more layouts available. So let's take a look at those. Let's go to Zorin Appearance, and here they are. The first four at the top we had previously, but look, there are many more down below. For example, there's this one, which I think is called Windows Classic. If we select that, we see it looks a bit like Classic Windows, although sadly, we don't have menus that pop out over here as they would in Classic Windows. And this one I think is a Linux Mint-like, and it gives us something that looks a little bit like Linux Mint, and this does have applications coming up in another column. I do quite like that, although I think still in Zorin OS I prefer the default layout. And as you might have seen as we look through some of those, the other thing we get, or at least the other thing we can get, is a lot more software installed. And I say we can get a lot more software installed as the installer includes an option for just a minimal install with just the standard software. But if you opt for everything, there's quite a difference, and so specifically if we bring up the menu like that and compare with Zorin OS 18 Core, we can see that under accessories we get a few more things. We won't focus on those, but under graphics there's a lot more. Blender, Darktable, FreeCAD, GIMP, Inkscape, Krita, LibreCAD. If we go a bit further down, if I can grab the menu, there it is, LibreCAD, OpenToon, Scribble, Shotwell. There's a lot more graphics software. Under Internet, there's hardly any difference at all. We get Newsflash, we don't get an extra browser. Although under Office, there is a reasonable amount added. It's more than just LibreOffice and a few extra bits, and a few things added in here. Although the other major extra category is sound and video, where we get Ardor, Audacity, Drum Machine, Handbrake for encoding, Kdenlive video editor. Going down, we also get OBS Studio and VLC Media Player. And just to finish things off, there is no difference under System Tools, we might not have expected that, and no difference under Utilities. Finally, it is worth noting that all of the extra applications included in Pro can be installed for free in the Core Edition. However, I know that some people do like everything pre-installed and do like to contribute to development costs. Zorin OS 18 is very polished indeed, and an excellent choice for those seeking to migrate from Windows to Linux. As with any Linux distro, it's not a direct replacement for Windows, as even with the included Wine technology, it cannot run many major Windows applications. But Zorin OS is trying very hard indeed to make the transition from Windows to Linux as easy as possible. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.